Good evening, everyone. This week's Parshas Terumah, Tavshin Pei Gimel. So the Parsha begins, and the Parsha is dedicated to the Hashem telling Moshe what to construct for the Mishkan. Now, Pasuk Perek Chavhei, chapter 25, Pasuk Ches, verse 8 reads, "V'asu li mikdash, they shall make a sanctuary for me, a holy place for me. Shachanti b'seicham, I will dwell in their midst." And as we said on Tuesday night, this pasuk, this verse, Hashem lays out the goal, the purpose. The goal is make a mikdash for the purpose of my divine presence resting in your midst. Okay, now let's skip one verse, pasuk Tes, verse 9. Let's go to pasuk Yud, verse 10. V'asu aron atzei shitim, and they shall make an ark of shittim wood. A masayim v'chetzi arkai, 2.5 cubits is its length. V'ama v'chetzi rachbai, an amma and a half its width. V'ama v'chetzi kamasai, an amma which we call a cubit and a half its height. So I want to share with you some really beautiful insights from Rav Shamash Lefal Hirsch on the next few verses. And he takes apart this verse in a very interesting way. First of all, he touches on what we mentioned again Tuesday night, the fact that we don't start with a discussion of the walls, but we begin discussion with the Aron. And the way Rav Hirsch lays it out is, and I'm going to read it to you, the orders start with the furnishings, meaning the vessels, for they are the essentials. The fact that we're starting with the utensils, it's going to be the ark, and then the table, and the menorah. The fact that the Torah begins with this shows that they are the essentials. They are the main part. And he says the tabernacle is there for the furnishings, not the furnishings for the tabernacle. Meaning the tabernacle, the building, the structure is there for what's inside. Not that what's inside is there for the structure. You know, very often when we talk about a house, we talk about a building. So we say there's a house, and the house is furnished with a stove, a fridge, a dining room table. We call the vessels, the vessels of a house, the furnishings. They are the furnishings of the house. That's how we look at it. The house is furnished with these things, which means that we're looking them all together. But what Rav Hirsch is saying here is that that's not how to look at the Mishkan. We don't look at the Mishkan as a structure that is furnished with an ark and furnished with a table and furnished with a menorah, as if to say we have this temple, this grand temple, we have this temple for Hashem, and in the temple we have these things. That's not how to look at it. We don't look at the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash as this grand temple for God. We do, but the focus is not, the Hirsch is saying that the focus is not on the temple, it's not on the structure. The main focus is on what's inside, the furnishings. It is the furnishings, the vessels, the aron, the ark, the shulchan, the table, the menorah, the candelabra, mizbeach, the altar, which constitute the mikdash. When you talk about, the pasuk says, "V'asu li mikdash," they should make for me a sanctuary. They should make for me a place of holiness. The mikdash, the place of holiness, really means the utensils. It is the vessels, rather. It is they that are to make us to see the sanctification and devotion, the elevation of all mundane matters to God. The goal, the reason why the vessels are the mikdash, it's because they are what symbolize and teach us how to sanctify ourselves in our lives. The vessels are meant to teach us how to live a life of kedusha, of sanctity. The vessels in many ways represent us and how we should live our lives, sanctifying everything for Hashem. And therefore, those vessels are the mikdash. And he concludes, the building itself, the Mishkan, which is the building, represents the result of this devotion, the fulfillment of the promise, Shachanti b'seicham, as a result of Asu li mikdash. The pasuk we started off with, make for me a mikdash. Make for me a mikdash means make those vessels that are the furnishings, learn from them how to sanctify your lives, and the result of that will be Shachanti b'seicham, I will dwell in your midst. Of course, you need the whole structure. You need the structure and the furnishings. And that is where we say, that is where the divine presence rests. But the mikdash, the sanctuary, the sanctified, the most sanctified part of the truth, the most sanctified part of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the part that's meant to teach us how to be kaddish, how to be holy, how to elevate the mundane, all the mundane matters in our lives, that comes from the vessels. That's why they're mentioned first. And that's the asuli mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, make the vessels, learn from them how to be holy. And the result of them will be, through the entire structure, v'shachanti b'seichem, I shall dwell in your midst. So that's the first comment of why it is the furnishings, the vessels of the Mishkan that are mentioned before the building. Now, as we mentioned before, at least here, where Hashem is telling Moshe what to make. When it came to actual building, it was the walls that came first. Okay, next. Next again on this same pasuk. The pasuk says, Ve'asu, and they shall make. Now, Rav Hirsch points out a question that many of the commentaries point out, and that is, in verse 10, when we talk about the ark, it says, Ve'asu, and they shall make. Okay? If you go to the, table, which is in verse 23, it says, Va'asisa shulchan, you shall make a table. And by the menorah, which is pasuk 31, pasuk lamed verse 31, the asisa menorah zavtar, you shall make a menorah of pure gold. By the ark it says, and they will make, and by the other articles it says, and you will make. Why is it by the ark it says va'asu in plural form? Says Rav Hirsch that the word va'asu plural form means to bring out a point that there's something about the Jewish people as a whole that are involved in the ark in a way that's unique to the ark more than the other vessels. So let me again read to you how he says this. Okay. The fact that it is couched in these words, it is something which is expected upon the whole nation. Just as now, this is how he explains. What does it mean? What's exactly expected from the whole nation here? Just as it says immediately above V'asu mikdash, right? The pasuk ches that we mentioned before, the pasuk where Hashem lays out what we're doing here. There also it says V'asu, and they shall make for me a mikdash. So here it says V'asu, and they shall make of ark. Of everything else, the command is in the second person, V'asisa, you shall make. And the point is, he writes that it almost seems that the whole task of Asuli Mikdash lies concentrated in V'asu Aronat Seishitim, and everything further is merely a wider extension of the Aron. The point is that the same way the pasuk said before, V'asuli Mikdash, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, and clearly that is something that we see as a job of the whole nation. When it says V'asu Aaron, and they shall make an ark, it's going back on that pasuk before. The pasuk before said they shall make the sanctuary, and now it says, and they shall make the ark. The commonality of those words means to say is that how do the Jewish people make a sanctuary? What's the main part of making the sanctuary? The answer is the ark. The ark is the main making of the sanctuary. And everything else is kind of secondary to that. It's kind of parts and extension of that. But the main Asuli Mikdash, the main part of the sanctuary, and as he said before, the main way of sanctifying our lives is going to be through the ark, through what the ark represents and what the ark teaches us. So that's the word v'asu. The word v'asu in plural means to bring out that which I said before, v'asuli mikdash, they shall make a mikdash. What's the main way of making the mikdash? What's the main way of elevating your lives and sanctifying your lives? It's because they will make the Aron, they will make the ark. Now he continues. The word Aron that we use for the ark, okay, there is another word that there's another type of container. Now, what's the ark? It's a container, right? It's a box, it's a container. It contains what? It contains the luchas, the tablets that Hashem gave Moshe. Now, there the Rav Hirsch focuses on the word aron. What is the word aron? When we talk about an aron, what are we talking about? What kind of a container? So he says, there's another type of container that's called an aron. You know what that is? A casket. A casket. Where you put a dead body in? It's called an aron. In Hebrew, you find in Hebrew, in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, it's called an aron. Same word.
But the aron, I believe it's or. It's light.
That's interesting. That there is such a concept.
But it's not light.
Yeah, good point. But Rav Hirsch says that aron actually means a container that what you're putting in there is meant to stay there. An aron holds something that is meant to remain there. It's meant to have permanence there, which means that when you take the tablets and you put them in the aron, you put them in the ark, it's meant to say that is a permanent connection. And what's the idea of that permanent connection? It's because, as he says, with the ark, Israel accepts the Torah. The ark, we find in different sources, actually represents us. The ark, it represents us, we the Jewish people. And just like the ark received and contained the Torah for it to remain there, we are meant to be the containers of the Torah. The Torah is meant to be part of the Jewish people in permanence. That's why we use the word aron here, because the Torah goes into the ark and it's meant to stay there. It's symbolic of we accepting the Torah and the Torah being permanently part of us. Now, he continues. The ark is called, make an ark of atzei shitim, make an ark of wood. Now we know the ark wasn't just made of wood. It was also made of gold, as we're about to learn. But it's interesting that the ark is called it said, make the ark of shittim wood. And the next pasuk we read in verse 11 is, and you shall cover it with gold, which clearly sounds like the shittim wood is the main part of the aron, and it's covered with gold. So what is the meaning behind this wood? Why is the ark made of wood? So Rav Hirsch says because wood represents a tree, and a tree represents growth, development. The ark, the Torah, goes into the Jewish people who are ready to be developed by it, who are ready to grow with it. It's put into the Jewish people in order to have them grow and develop and progress closer and closer to Hashem. That was what the wood represents. Now, as he points out, and this is really mentioned in, Pasuk Tes Zayin, verse 16, V'nasata elo aron, you shall put into the ark, as for Edus, a testimony, asher eten elecha, that I will give to you. What's the testimony? The testimony means the Torah, which were the tablets that Hashem gave Moshe. The tablets upon which the 10 commandments were inscribed, and Hashem says, you're going to put in the aron the testimony that I will give you. Right now, where's Moshe right now? Moshe's on Har Sinai. Hashem is telling this to Moshe on Har Sinai. And Hashem says that those tablets that I'm going to give you are going to go into the ark. Now, Rav Hirsch points out the tablets were made out of stone, right? Stone doesn't grow. Stone is permanent. It stays the way it is. The Torah of stone, the Torah that doesn't change, the Torah that we learn more and more, we learn it deeper and deeper. We learn how to apply it to different types of situations, but it doesn't change. The Torah of stone, the unchanging Torah, goes into the shittim, goes into the wood, goes to the wood container, which represents us, the Jewish people, that are ready to take the Torah and to grow with it and to develop from it. Now, Pasuk Yud, verse 11. V'tzepisa oisai zahav tar. You shall cover it with pure gold. V'bayis mechutz etzapenu. From inside and outside you shall cover it. Now, what does it mean they covered it with gold? They melted gold and painted it with gold? What did they do? What does it mean the inside and the outside of the ark is gold? How did they make it gold? They melted gold on top of it? They dipped the wood part into gold? What did they do?
Cover.
No, to cover something else. That's the next thing. This is the ark itself. That wooden ark is covered with gold. So Rashi explains that covering doesn't means that actually the ark was made of 3 containers, 3 open boxes. The outer one was gold, the inner one was wood, and then the third one, the inner one was gold. And then eventually it was covered with a gold cover. Okay? But this is what it means, cover it with gold. You have a wood box that's inside a gold box and a gold box inside the wood box. Open box on top. Now, what does that symbolize? What does the gold symbolize? So he says like this: with the qualities of development, of growing, must at the same time be associated firmness, stubborn persistence, and immutability for all that is noble and good, true and genuine. The divine Torah demands both ability to develop and at the same time firmness in those that receive it. And this noble firmness has to hold good both internally towards itself and externally toward outside influences. Meaning, the wood, it's about developing, it's about growing, it's about changing. But there's also, together with that, there has to be a firmness. There has to be a level, there has to be a certain trait of not bending, of being strong and unbending, of being a noble firmness. And these are the words that he says very beautifully. An inner and outer life, sterling and firm, noble and genuine, free from resisting all alteration and deterioration. These are the conditions, these are the golden limits within which life from the Torah is to progressively develop like a tree. Outside, we have these golden limits. We have these very precious, important limits. But they're limits. It's gold. It's hard gold. This is not something that you can press and change. The gold is firm because it's meant to say that you are growing in Torah and are ready to change through Torah. At the same time, you have to be firm. There's a certain level of firmness. You need a firmness on the outside. It means you got to be strong against outside influences. And you have to be firm inside. That means you have to be sincere, you have to be genuine, you have to be real. You have to make sure that your inner life doesn't deteriorate. You got to make sure that you stay strong. That is the meaning of the gold on the outside and the inside. You've got the wood. You're leading a life of Torah by which you're going to progress, you're going to grow, you're going to develop, you're going to change. But together with that, you need the golden limits. The firmness that says, I'm not going to bend and change to outside influences, and I'm not going to change to any kind of deterioration or that comes from within. Okay. Then the Torah again says, this is the second half of Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vasi sa'alav zer zahav saviv. You shall make on it a golden, call it a crown. Now what that means is like this. That means if you can imagine, try to imagine, I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Ar in the Ark. It's a box, right? Now, around the top edge, there's like a crown that comes up. And really what that was the wall itself. It wasn't like they took a crown and put a crown on top of the Ark. But rather it means that the wall itself came up a little bit higher than the covering. And what came up was at the top of the wall was this crown. Okay, so here this picture, right? You got the 3 boxes, and here you see on the top they've got, looks like this edge thing. That's the zer, that's the crown, and it's not something separate. It's part of the wall. As the wall comes up, and it goes above the covering. This crown comes up. What is the meaning of this crown? So Rav Hirsch explains in the following way. First of all, it's called a zer. A zer is spelled the same way as zar, which means strange. A zer is also part of the word nazer, which means a crown. And what that means is that there's a certain quality of what we'd call strangeness, but not strangeness in like the weird way, but strangeness in the way that it's unapproachable. This is something separate from us. I'm looking at it as a crown. A crown symbolizes a level of elevation above others, which also means a certain level of not being able to be approached. Right? A king, you can't just approach a king. The crown on top symbolizes a certain level of separateness, of being separate. And he says what that means is like this. Let me read it to you. Okay. And again, he brings out the point that this is something that comes up from the wall itself. Inasmuch as here in the case of the ark, the zer was not a separate piece, but was formed by a projecting part of the ark itself. It seems to mean if Israel will only give itself up to keep and use its strength and firmness and sterling purity in its inner and outer life, then by itself it becomes unassailable also from outside forces. In the Devarim there's a pasuk. All the nations of the land will see the name of God is called upon you and fear you. If you'll live the type of life that Hashem wants you to, the nations of the world will fear you. You will be untouchable. And that is what comes out that's symbolized in the fact that the golden wall itself, which means that wall that says you're staying firm and you're staying holy and you're not allowing yourself to be influenced from outside influences. From that arises this crown. From this arises that being elevated over others, that others won't touch you. You'll be untouchable. That the nations of the world will not be able to they'll be afraid of you. They won't treat you badly. So that is what lies in the zer. That this crown says that from the wall itself, if you will live by what the wall is trying to teach you about that life, and not only the outer wall, the outer firmness, the inner firmness that he mentions before, when you will live by that, then that crown will come up. You will be zer. You'll be separated from the nations of the world, because at that point, the nations will fear you because they'll see the name of Hashem on you. Okay, next. This is now we got to read the next three verses, 13, 14, and 15. 13 reads, V'asisa ba'adei atzei shitim. You shall make poles of shitim wood, v'tzipisa isam zav, and cover them with gold. Ve'veisas habadim ataba'ois, and you shall put the poles into the rings al tzalei sa'arin that were on the corners, that were on the sides of the ark. L'asei sa'arin bohem. What's the purpose of those poles? To carry the ark by them. But tabois ha'arin yu abadim. In the rings of the ark shall the poles remain. Though yisiru mimenu, they shall not be removed from it. So this is very interesting. There are these poles that their purpose is to carry the ark, and the ark had to be carried. If any time the Jewish people traveled, they had to take apart the tabernacle, and they had to travel, and they had to carry the vessels. So they needed these poles to carry the ark. But if the purpose of the poles is to carry, well, that means when you carry them, they can be there. If you don't need to carry them, they don't need to be there. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says that they shall remain there. What is the point of those poles remaining there? So Rav Hirsch says, again, a fascinating idea. He says that the badim, reading again to you from his writings, the badim, the means of carrying the ark, symbolically represent the command and the mission to carry the ark and its contents, if it becomes necessary, away from the precincts of its present position, right? If you need to move the ark where it is right now, you've got the poles to carry it by. The command that these means of transport may never be lacking, the fact that they always have to be there even when we're not traveling, is to emphasize in our minds the fact that from the very beginning it must be made clear that this Torah and its mission is in no way bound or confined to the place of existence at any time of the temple and sanctuary. Meaning, there is a constant reminder by the poles that are meant to carry the ark. The fact that they are always there means to teach us that we should always be cognizant, we should always be aware of the fact that the ark, if need be, should be transported. If need be, the Aron will be transported from this place. If need be, it doesn't have to, the ark, or what the ark represents, which is the Torah, doesn't have to be in the Beis HaMikdash. The lesson is that the Torah is not dependent on the Beis Hamikdash. And we're constantly reminded by the fact that there is this constant sign of the fact that the ark, if need be, can be carried away. Why do we need this constant reminder of that? Because it's a reminder to teach us that the Torah doesn't need the Beis Hamikdash. Even without the Beis Hamikdash, we have Torah. And we live by Torah. And we study Torah. And he says, contrast that to the other vessels. The meaning of the constant presence of the Badim as proof of the dependence of the Torah of any place receives further emphasis when it's contrasted to the other vessels of the sanctuary, especially to the table menorah, both of which have to be supplied with Badim, with poles. But the poles did not have to be permanently in place, but only inserted when actually to be used. That's the other menorah and the shulchan don't need the poles to constantly be there. They don't have that reminder of the fact that these things are independent of the Mishkan. The thought immediately jumps to one's mind: Israel's table and Israel's menorah. The table represents Israel's material life and its full completeness, and the menorah represents its spiritual, intellectual life in complete clarity and brightness. Are bound to the soil of the Holy Land. Israel's Torah is not. The table of the Jewish people represents the shleimus, the completeness of the material life of the Jewish people. The menorah with the candles burning, with the lights burning, represents the clarity and brightness of the spiritual and intellectual life of the Jewish people. There, we don't have that. The poles aren't there all the time. There is no reminder there of the fact that these things we always have to remember that they can be moved from here. They don't need they don't have that reminder of independence from the Mishkan. Because you know what? They're not independent of the Mishkan. They're not independent of the Beis Hamikdash. The kashlemus, the completeness of the material life of the Jewish people, depends on the Beis Hamikdash and Eretz Yisrael. And when they talk about the spiritual and intellectual life of the Jewish people, it needs Eretz Yisrael and the Beis Hamikdash. But the Torah itself, observing the Torah, studying the Torah, that is independent of the Beis Hamikdash. And even though the fact that the menorah is dependent on the Beis Hamikdash, which means our clarity in Torah is not the same without Eretz Yisrael and the Beis Hamikdash, but nonetheless, the Torah itself is independent of the Beis Hamikdash. So those poles are there in order to remind us of the constant need. It's there to remind us constantly that if the ark needs to be transported from this place, that it can be. And that meant to symbolize that the Torah needs to be transported out of the Beis Hamikdash because there is no Beis Hamikdash. It's meant to be transported because the Torah isn't dependent on the Beis Hamikdash. The other vessels don't have that. They have Badim, they have the poles to carry them, but they're not there permanently, not there all the time, because they don't have that idea of independence from the Mikdash, from the Beis Hamikdash. They need the Shekhinah. What they represent, which is again the completeness in the material life of the Jewish people, the completeness in the spiritual, intellectual life of the Jewish people, that needs the Torah. That needs the Beis Hamikdash and Eretz Yisrael. Our clarity in Torah needs Eretz Yisrael and the Beis Hamikdash. But the Torah itself, living by the Torah, studying by the Torah, growing with the Torah, that is independent of the Beis Hamikdash. That is wherever we may be. So I think these are really beautiful interpretations and ideas that Rav Hirsch is bringing out as he started off with. What is the Mikdash? What's the sanctuary? What teaches us to be holy? The vessels of the vessels of the Mishkan. And which one does it primarily? The Aron, the Ark, because it represents us, the containers of Torah. And how we contain the Torah within us with the goal of growing and progressing and coming closer and closer to Hashem, with the firmness on the inside and outside of the gold firmness that says we're not going to budge or bend to things that are against the Torah. we have that constant reminder of the fact that the ark, the Torah, if need be, it will travel out of the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't need the Torah itself doesn't need the Beis Hamikdash. The other ideas, the ark, what the menorah represents, what the table represents, what they represent, the completeness in material life, the clarity and completeness in spirit, in the spiritual and intellectual life, that needs the Beis Hamikdash. But the Torah itself is independent. And wherever we may be, under whatever circumstances we may live, we have the Torah by which to observe and to study and to grow from. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
A lot of different